Alright, hey everybody, this is Kurt Hollowell with Doggy Dog Games, and I'm here to do Diary Entry 2 for the Dream Build Play competition. In this tutorial, I'm going to be talking about these bad boys, these controllers, how to create your own custom controllers, at least the models anyway, and make them look cool. I also realized that you can stream the view of the headset to the screen, so that's real helpful if you have anyone else that you want to that's watching you play, or for doing videos like this. This is a Microsoft Cliffside. It's basically just a cool place where you can hang out. It's kind of like the desktop. You can teleport around. I had also mentioned this desktop app in the last tutorial, and to get there, you just hit this little Windows button, hit All Apps, and then you'll see desktop right there, so you can drag that out. Pop it somewhere. There you go. Now here's my desktop. Since I'm streaming my desktop, we get this weird mirror effect. But anyways, let's go and see if I can click on Unity from here. So I also wanted to just show off my game, how the controllers are working. Last time I talked about how to get them to work, but you can see it for yourself. All right, just patient 1 second while it... Usually the first time you hit play, it takes a little bit to get the headset going. After that, it seems to happen a lot faster. I really like this app fadeaway effect that they have. But here's the start of my game. It's called Vivo, and we're changing the name to Beat Planet Madness. So I'm not sure by the end of the entry if we'll be able to do that or not. But anyways, here's starting screen. You start by just looking around, deciding where you want to place the game, and then you hit a button to get it started. So this is just kind of the start screen. I apologize for a little bit of lag. I think it's just when you're recording the stream and through the headset and all that. But here's the controllers that I've made. You can see if I put my hand on my joystick, that rotates around. There's a little particle effect. If I start touching the touchpad, there's a particle effect. You can hit buttons, like if I hit the left trigger, you get a little particle effect. And here's the game. It's a spherical shooter wrapped around a star, so you use the left joystick to move and the right joystick to aim. And looks like something crazy started happening with my controller right there.
Game paused.
It's okay, we'll worry about that later. So let me just talk about the game for a second. Basically, you have a charge shot, and you have to release and sync with the beat, and then you also have some different abilities, and basically you hold right trigger and this little ability wheel pops up, and whenever you release it, it does a different ability based on where you released it. So you try and release it inside one of those circles, kind of like Rock Band. So let's go ahead and get started. Here's the game. I'm really having a fun time playing this in VR. It's just a lot more immersive. You feel like you're right there as part of the action. It's a lot more intense than just kind of having it on the screen. Plus, it's just fun to be able to like look out in outer space, have some particle effects. I may do another tutorial on the camera script if anyone's interested. For things like this where you're rotating around the sphere, there's a specific way you should do it to avoid gimbal lock. Anyways, I think that's enough of the game so far, and let's go into how do you create these controllers for yourself.
Game pause.
So I'm just going to hit pause, pop my headset up, and take it off for a second. There we go. Sometimes I've noticed this issue with the cursor. If you maybe I'll turn my controllers off. I wonder if the mixed reality controllers have an effect on it. Or it looks like maybe the gaze is too. There you go. I turned my controllers off, and now I have control over my cursor again. So anyways, let's go into figure out how to design these things. So under the Holotoolkit examples, input and scenes, there is a motion controller test. go ahead and duplicate that scene to start. I've done that and call it controller designer. And let's get into how these controllers are created and managed. We talked about it a little bit in the last diary, but check out this motion controller visualizer script under the mixed reality camera parent object that they included in the Holotoolkit. There's these two flags saying if you want to use alternate models or not, and you can drag and drop some prefabs in. They have one in there already called controller rect, and it's basically just a rectangle. So let's drag that into our scene and use that. It looks like I already had one. There you go. And so basically it's just this rectangle. And you can, it's really handy for designing your own controller, so you can put it next to this rectangle and get the right spacing for everything. I've noticed the rectangle is about 2 times as big in the Z direction as it should be, but the X and Y are appropriate. So just design with that in mind. If you wanted to change the Z to 0.15, I think, or maybe 0.2, that would probably be a more appropriate size to use for designing your own controllers. So what I did is basically just started creating primitive objects, dragging them into the scene, placing them. You can all take one of these controllers and you can see, I'll turn some of the mesh renderers back on so you can see kind of how it started to look. I just built a couple rectangles, one here, one for the, I'm calling this the control panel, and I also had a tracking cylinder object. Let me go ahead and turn this off. The reason that was on, that's why we were seeing that weird effect when I was playing the game. But so yeah, just start dragging your objects in. I had my real controller on my desk and was just using that as a visual reference to create them. And the way I made my controllers look cool is I used some cool materials and some, let's see, control panel, where is that? Sorry, it's all right. So I use these 2 packages that I have. One is called the audio visualizer. Yeah, I made these packages. This audio visualizer basically does beat detection and some cool visuals on top of music. So if you're making a music-based game, definitely check this package out. And the mesh tracer package on the asset store, which like replaces the mesh with line renderers or overlays it with particle effects, stuff like that. So that's how I went about designing my controller, basically using this controller rect, dragging the objects in. And then I have a little custom controller script which has a reference to all the buttons like the grasp, select, the touchpad, the joystick. And in the next diary entry, I'm going to be talking about this script, how to get the joystick to rotate around and scale these buttons when you press them. Display like an effect or an icon or cursor like above the item that's being used, stuff like that. There was something I ran into, a bug when designing these controllers, so you might run into that yourself, and that is if you hit apply and your controller is not at 000 when you hit apply, then basically inside the game it's not going to show up at the right spot. So to show this off, it looks like my left controller is at 000. My right controller, let's give it an offset of like 0.3. And I'll just hit apply on that right controller. Now I'll hit play. Let me make sure I'm using these. Okay, still using those ultimate models. I'm going to hit play here. Switch back to the headset view. I got to turn my controllers back on. I turned them off. See if they just come in right away. There you go. So I have my controllers. Now, in my hands, I'm really holding the controllers right next to each other like this. So I'm going to do that now. In the physical space, the controllers are right next to each other. But you'll see that the right controller has this offset of 0.3. So just because we hit that apply prefab when this controller object was not in the 000 location, then you get this weird offset. It took me a while to figure that out, so hopefully I saved somebody else some time there. So So I don't know if I showed this off yet. Yeah, there's some nice snappy particle effects when you hit the buttons. So I'm going to be talking about that. For these particle effects, I used a package called Hyperbit Arsenal. I would really recommend it. It just has some cool arcadey particle effects. Alright, let me hit play again. Pause this. Okay. So, yeah, that was the big lesson learned there, was to just use this controller rect to get the dimensions of your controller right as you're designing it. Also, just design one controller at a time. I found it really helpful to just start with one controller and go through as many iterations as you can until you're happy with it, and then just duplicate the controller, and anything that has like an X offset, just, you know, flip the sign on it, make it a negative X position instead of a positive, and you'll get the exact same right controller. And then if you're designing this in a 3D modeling software, just make sure to make these buttons their own game objects. Each one have it as a separate game object. That way you can do things like scale the buttons when you press them, stuff like that. So in the next diary, I'm going to be talking about this script, and I'll make sure to include it for you to use. Let me make sure there's anything else I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, I think the only other thing on my list to talk about in this diary was how to remove the floor, because I'm working on a space game. I didn't really want this floor in there. There's like a quad that gets generated, and that object is again under the mixed reality camera parent, and it's called Boundary Manager. So I just turned that object off for now. If you're using a game where you're walking around, you definitely want a floor and a boundary so the user doesn't run into stuff. I'm designing more of a seated experience, so I think it's okay if I just remove this and tell the user not to hurt themselves. One other thing I should mention, I just thought of, is if you have any custom camera controls, add them on the root object, this mixed reality camera parent. You can't do any camera controls on the camera itself, and that's because the transform for the camera gets taken over by the headset. So if you want to move the camera around in your game, but through teleporting or any other effect, just apply that script on top of this mixed reality camera parent. You'll see that's where they have their mixed reality teleport script that's in there by default. So I think that is it for this diary. Oh, you know what? It isn't. It's not even over yet. Okay, so I also want to talk about the default controllers, because originally when I went to design these, I was thinking, well, let's use the Unity default controllers and just add some different materials on top of those. So maybe you want to do something like that. So I'm just going to turn this use alternate off, and I will hit play. And you'll see, if you're not using the alternate controllers, just the default ones will show up. They look really nice. You can see the buttons getting pressed, the joystick move, and all that. So if you want to use this, I'll show you where it pops up. You just hit pause and look at this in the scene view. The mixed reality objects get put in this don't destroy unload thing. That way if you switch scenes, they stay in the scene. But under the motion controllers object we were just looking at, you can see the left controller got instantiated, and we have this big tree hierarchy of all the objects inside it. So let me go look at it. Here it is in the game. So, but what I found is you can't really customize this in any way. The meshes for this controller are hidden. You can kind of double click on it and view it, but I feel like these probably came from a DLL or something like that. I was hoping to find the model for these inside the project, like an OBJ or something. It didn't exist, so I even have a script that can export models, but that didn't even work either, because this object is like locked down. You can't drag and drop it into any other script, like in the inspector. It just won't let you. So yeah, for example, I have a model exporter. I'm just going to add that onto a random object, and you can drag and drop in a game object, and it would export the model, but it's not letting me. Everything's locked down. So if you want to work with these, what you can maybe do is do like a get all components in children for this motion controllers object. Get all the components in the children and export from there. So I'll play around with that more. And shoot, now that I say it, I wonder if I can use my model exporter on just this main object. No, it won't let me. Won't let me do any of that. I even tried, moving this out, then doing it. Anyways, so if you want to mess with this controller on your own and you figure it out, please let me know. Or if there's some way, some way you figure out to export this model, let me know. Otherwise, just design your own controller. I think it's adds a little more, spice into your game, makes it a little more yours. People see their controllers change. It just fits in. To design something that fits in with the theme of your game and steps up the immersion. Anyways, that is officially all for this diary entry. Like I said, in the next one, I'm going to be talking about this custom controller script, and I'll hand that out to everyone so you can use it on your own custom controllers. All right, catch you later.